Welcome back to this updated CPS web tip on the Automate Evolve platform. In today's video, we'll be talking about a core concept of Automate Evolve. That'll be reference data lists, commonly known as RDLs. We'll talk about how these are core for MDM teams and really anyone using the platform. For more on that, creating and maintaining these objects, here's Jason.
So this is Web Tips for WinShuttle, and as I said, my name is Jason King. Just a few quick housekeeping things. Everybody's phones are muted. If you want to type in a question into the chat, feel free to do so, and I'll try to catch them as we go. If I don't end up seeing them, then we'll go ahead and answer those at the end of the presentation and the demonstration. As I mentioned, my name is Jason King. I have over 17 years of SAP experience as a user and as a support person on the more technical side of SAP. And in addition to that, 10 years of experience using and teaching other people to use WinShuttle products. Prior to joining CPS back in 2016, I led the Wisconsin WinShuttle user group and worked for Johnsonville Sausage. So we'll go right ahead and just jump in because this is a pretty big topic and I want to get through as much as we can. So what I'm trying to do today is just give everybody some exposure to the new WinShuttle platform, which is called WinShuttle Evolve. And then more specifically show how to manage the master data within WinShuttle Evolve, specifically referring to what's called reference data. And as I mentioned, we'll make sure that as we leave here, we understand how to convert, create, and maintain reference data lists. And then we'll have some time for Q&A as well. So WinShuttle has evolved. This is just a quick screenshot of the new platform and what it looks like when you log in. Evolve is WinShuttle's new platform. It combines the entire WinShuttle suite of products into one environment. So within this environment, you'd have everything that you had with Studio and what used to be Central and user governance, and that's now also combined with the Composer tool is in here, and your forms and workflows, and all that stuff that goes along with forms and workflows. It's all in this one environment now. Composer is still the form and workflow development tool. However, it's, as I just mentioned, now available within the Evolve environment, so you don't need to navigate to a different URL to do your form and workflow development. The Studio desktop application itself is largely unchanged from the standpoint of the user interface and how it looks and feels. It looks almost identical as it did in version 12.1 of Foundation. The biggest and most important change from Foundation to Evolve is that Evolve does not run on the SharePoint platform. In fact, there's no need anymore for an on-premise SharePoint environment at all when you move to Evolve. And that's a huge benefit for customers who need to get off their on-prem instance of SharePoint because their company's either moving to Office 365 or they need to upgrade SharePoint to 2016 from 2013 or earlier. And when you do that, when you move from SharePoint 2013 or earlier to 2016 or greater, there are licensing fees that are associated with SharePoint from Microsoft. The free version of SharePoint ends at SharePoint 2013. So that's another reason why companies are looking to maybe move to Evolve, because they need to get rid of that on-prem SharePoint instance. And additionally, just in my experience converting dozens of solutions from Designer to Evolve or Foundation to Evolve, I've just found that Evolve is much faster than Foundation and offers a more centralized place for all the WinShuttle related tools and data. So, some of the key differences between Foundation and Evolve, obviously the biggest one is the underlying platform itself. Evolve is a proprietary platform designed by WinShuttle, and it does not utilize SharePoint in any way, as I mentioned, and therefore it's no longer reliant on SharePoint. And that's a great thing for WinShuttle customers because now WinShuttle has full control of every aspect of their application, and changes that occur within SharePoint will no longer affect the WinShuttle suite of tools. Some quick translations as we move, from the foundation to Evolve environment. SharePoint groups that we used to have within SharePoint to manage which users would generally have access to which parts of the solutions that you would develop, usually you use to resolve swim lanes. Those are now just called groups in Evolve, and they're set up relatively similarly, but just, obviously the navigation to them will be a little bit different. I'm going to go ahead right now and just exit the PowerPoint, and I'm going to jump directly into our CPS Evolve environment just to kind of show you where some of these things are. So, for example, in the foundation environment, you go to people and groups, and that's where you would manage your groups. So you might have, for example, maybe like a finance team group, and in there you put all the people that should have access to finance related items. Right? In Evolve, that's managed within what's called an app, and you do have to be an app admin. And real quick before I lose anybody on the app, so the form site, for example, here in the foundation environment, I am in our CPS demo environment, right? So this is their demo form site. A form site in Evolve now becomes what's called an app. So in here, I'm in our demo app, okay? And you can have many apps. We have demo, and then for several other customers, as well as our own individual apps. But there's also an administration app, which is where all of the governance around who has, what access to what, and all the administrative things that you would typically do that I'm not going to get into in this particular web tips presentation. That's all at the admin app, right? And then there's what's called a reference data app, and that's for any kind of, master data that you would use between apps. So more of a global level, but again, let's glaze over that because that's not really what we want to focus on today. So just understand that form sites are now apps, and I'm working in our demo app. And then within that demo app, because I am an administrator, I can go into the configuration. So when I go into the configuration, that's where I can then create or manage my groups. So I click manage groups, and then we have these various groups. And again, it's just as simple as, creating a group. You just add, put your name in, hit save. The group is then there. And then to add users, it's just as simple as clicking the number over in the far right-hand side. You pick a user, you click add, and they're now added. Okay. And that's managing your groups. Another change is, a solutions process list in Foundation is now just called a solution data list. So, when we take a look at Foundation in the demo app here, I might have a solution called, let's just say we had a demo request materials, okay? That's going to take me into my request materials process list, if you will, right? And all of these different columns are all of the columns that I had promoted from my solution to this particular list. Well, that goes away because there is no SharePoint. So now in Evolve, it's called a solution data list. And that can be viewed by basically going to documents, and maybe I go to my cost center change, for example. I don't have anything in here, but you can see like cost center, like CC name, cost center link. These are the solution data fields that I've promoted, right? So the fields that were promoted in Foundation, these are just known as promoted fields, like creator email, it's a promoted field. Request ID, it's a promoted field. Now it's called a solution data field, okay? And those are found in the solution data list. Again, SharePoint libraries are now called solution data libraries. And as I mentioned, form sites are now apps. And those are just some key differences. The things where SharePoint was the underlying platform is now in Evolve no longer using SharePoint. So I just kind of wanted to do a quick jump around to just show some of those different kinds of things. But probably the biggest one, and one of the most important, is SharePoint lists, right? What are SharePoint lists now? Well, now they're called reference data lists. And that's what we're going to spend most of our session here talking about, is reference data lists. So when I say lists, it's just like in SharePoint when I would go to this lists link, and then I would, open a list, let's just go to delivery plans, right? So I have a list of delivery plans. So I have sales org, distribution channel, whatever other columns I may have in here. So that's my delivery plans SharePoint list. Well, in Evolve, that's now called, like I said, a reference data list, and that's found in the solutions section of Evolve under reference data lists. And if I navigate through here, I can find my corresponding delivering plant list, right? So if I check the box in front of that and I view data, I can see I have sales org, delivery plant, plant user. So this list is a little bit different because it's for a different purpose, but that's the translation. So these are now reference data lists. And what we're going to talk about now in the demonstration is, how do I take this list and convert it to a reference data list, or how do I create a new reference data list? And then once I have them in my Evolve environment, how do I maintain them, right? So a real quick crash course on basically converting, if you're doing that, is you're probably going to want to use Internet Explorer, right? So if I just quickly copy this link, open up Internet Explorer, paste that in, that should open up my SharePoint list. I'll have to log in real quick first. And the reason why we'd want to do this in Internet Explorer is because Internet Explorer has the built-in functionality with Microsoft Office products, and then I can basically export this list to Excel. So if I click list, I can click export to Excel, and then I can click save. I'll just do a save as so that I can decide where I want to put this. So I'll put it in my reference data list, and I'll just call this delivery plant, and I'll hit save. And then I can open the folder. There's my list. If I double click that, it's going to open Microsoft Excel. It'll probably prompt me to log in. I'll click enable. Then again, it'll prompt me to log in because it wants to make sure that I have access to this data. I believe it does that twice. Nope, just once. Okay, so now I have my data in Excel, which is what I want because that's what I can use to then create my reference data list. Okay, so first thing to be aware of, I'm going to get rid of my filters just to make sure I'm not missing anything. And then these last two columns I won't need. That gets generated by SharePoint. We don't use SharePoint anymore, so we can just delete that. Okay, and then we have all of our data as we need it. So then I could just do a file. I'm going to do a save as again, because as you can see that it was kind of when you export it, it's a goofy file extension, and I want to save mine in Excel just because. So I'll just get rid of the .iqy delivery plant, and I will hit save, and now I have this saved as an Excel file. Okay, so step one to create a reference data list is go to the Evolve environment. So we'll jump back to Evolve, and I would then want to add a reference data list. So I'll go to Solutions, Reference Data List, and I'll choose the Add Schema. Okay, and then I'll give it a name. I'll just call it Plant Demo. Category, this you can put whatever this might apply to: customer, material, vendor. Maybe you have something else. I'm just going to call it Demo. And then the description can be whatever you want it to be. I'm just going to put the name of the list in there. Maybe you want it to be a little bit more specific and say Delivery Plant RDL for Demo. Great. Okay. So then we hit next, and you can create your reference data list either manually, and you can add your field. So you click add, and then you add a field, pick the field type, how long is it allowed to be, and is it required or not. And then you hit next, and then you hit add another one, so on and so forth. You can create it from a query, so you could create a WinShuttle query in Studio and have the reference data list loaded via that query, just like we do now when we load a SharePoint list with a query. So that's that method. And then the method we're going to show today that's probably the easiest, especially when converting, is create from Excel. So I'll check the create from Excel radio button, and then I'll pick my file. And as we saw before, I save that in my documents, presentation, and then I have it right here. So I can click that, and there's only one sheet in there, and it knows what it is, so it automatically picked it. And then I can just review what I'm bringing in. Okay, so this is going to be the name of my column, and I'm fine with that. That's what it was in SharePoint, so that's okay with me. And then you can choose the file type. So string max is basically the equivalent of multiple lines of text from SharePoint. You can also just do a string, which is like single line of text. There's integer, decimal, and then date and time. I'd really only change this if you know it needs to be something specific. Otherwise, I'd leave it alone. And then as far as if something's required or not, real quick, easy way to check that is I've jumped back to my Internet Explorer. And if I go to list settings, I can just quickly check and nothing was required. Now you also can check, okay, these were all single line of text. So I could go back in Evolve and change these to single line of text. I'm just going to leave it though. Okay, so we have everything set up here. My columns look good. So then from there, I would hit next. And now we get brought to the mapper. So you're probably wondering, okay, if this is a reference data list, why do I have to create a mapping and what am I creating a mapping to? This mapping is to an Excel template. Because from now on, when we manage our reference data lists, we're going to use an Excel template within Excel itself in the Studio add-in tool to pull our data from the reference data list, maintain it, and then load it back in. Okay, so basically we're saying I want to map the first column to column A and then the second one to B, C, D. I generally don't ever change this. You can if you need it to be specific. So I just usually leave it and then I hit submit. Once I've hit submit, that has then created my reference data list schema. There's no data in the list just yet, but it's created my schema. And now I have to take this list, and if you have a long list of them, you might have to search through and find it. But I have to take this and I have to get this moved from draft status to production status. And the way that I do that is scroll over and there's an actions column and we click the ellipses button here and we click publish. Okay, so now we're into the publish screen. Here you can choose to either publish a template, that's the Excel template that I just mentioned that we did the mapping for, or you can choose not to. Note that if you don't create a template, the only way to maintain the data in this list is manually, one row at a time. So if you have to load a ton of records into the list, you're going to have to put each one in, and when I say put each one in, I mean type each one in one at a time. I don't recommend this method personally. I think it really takes a lot of flexibility in the list out. It takes governance in the list out. So my recommendation would be to publish the template. When I do that, it enables the select workflow field. That's basically just like when you publish a transaction script. Do I want no data review? Do I want somebody to review my data and then then they can post it, or they review it and send it back to me and I post it? Or do you want to do something custom like an Excel workflow? For our purposes, we're just going to do no data review process. Basically, it tells anybody if you have access to the template, then you can update the data. Okay, and then if you want to leave comments, you can. I'm not going to. I'm just going to click publish, and that's going to put my list into production status. Okay. So now I have my list in production status, and that means the schema itself is there. So if I click on the check mark in front of my list and I do view data or view schema, I'll do view data. So you can see here's my columns. There's no data available. So how do we get the data into this list? We do that by using that template that we created. So if we go to templates and we go to the Excel option, we can see that there should be a Dell Plant Demo template right here. Now, if I click on that, it's going to download an Excel file that will be blank, and I could put my data into it and then use the Studio add-in tool to run it and load the data. But a better way to do that is just to start right in Excel itself. Okay, so if I go to Studio and I click log on, and understand that you have to have Studio for Evolve, so basically Studio 20.0 or higher installed to do this. You can't do this with Foundation because you need to obviously point to the Evolve environment. So I have Evolve installed and I'm going to log in. And once I'm logged in, this will look very familiar to those of you who have used the Studio add-in. It's very similar to what you saw in Foundation. There is another tab now called Evolve. I believe it was called Publish before, something to that effect in Foundation. But first things first is we were working in a demo app right? So in Evolve, the app that we're working in is demo. So I want to make sure, now that I'm logged in, that I'm pointing to the demo app. So I can choose switch app and choose demo, or when I clicked the drop down, it'll tell me what app I'm in as well. So I'm in the demo app, so I didn't need to switch, but that's how you would switch apps and point to a different app if you needed to. Okay, so now if I go to Evolve, I can click open and I can choose my template. Should be the first one because it's the most recent one that we just created, and there it is at the top of the list. So if I click that and then click open, it's going to open that blank template. Now, if this list was already created and had data added to it, all that data would show up here, okay? It would show up here and I could change it, I could delete some of it, I could add to it, and then run that data back in. Because there was nothing in the list, this is the first time we're putting anything in, I have to just quickly jump back over to my output. I'll copy my data, paste it in here, and it's good to go. So now on the Studio tab, I can click Run. And it's going to say, when I'm done loading this list, I'm going to save this Excel file here so that you have a record of what you loaded in. And it's kind of nice. It's like version control on your lists. So I'll hit OK. It'll quickly just load those 8 records. It's going to put a log column out here and tell me, hey, this is done. I click OK. And that run is completed. Okay. And then now this becomes a read-only file. And again, that is stored in the Evolve environment, so I have a record of what was loaded into that list. And if I go back to Evolve now, and I go to Solutions, and I take a look at this list, I now see that all that data is now there. Okay. Now, if I were to close this read-only file, okay, and I want to open my template now, okay, so now I say, okay, well, I want to make a change to that, right? I want to change that data that I had just entered. The way that you're going to maintain all your lists now is you go to Evolve and you click Open, and you click the list you want to change, the template for it. So we'll stick with our delivery plant demo. I'll double click that. It'll open up and bring in all the data that currently exists. So this is what I was talking about before. So I could change this to say, okay, well, now this should be distribution channel 24, and maybe it's plant 1200, and so on, right? Update my description. Okay. And maybe we don't have this plant 1200 anymore. Okay. So now I can go ahead and run that again. And you'll see that I put an _1 after it because the next file will be _1. It's going to save this again out in the demo app, loaded everything up, says it's done. And now if I go back to Evolve and I just kind of jump back so I can refresh, you can see that I have my new 24, 1200 Hamburg, and then the 1200 Berlin or whatever one that was, that's gone now. Okay, so it basically just overwrites everything that was in there. It clears everything and overwrites it when we maintain the list that way. Okay, so that is basically how you would convert a list and then how you maintain it. We saw a little bit too about how we would create a list. Okay, so if I go back to Solutions and I click Add Schema, this is me creating a list, right? So I name the list and then I get into the schema creation. So we'll just quickly do another one just so we can talk a little bit about the other options. Okay, so create manually, right? So we created from Excel. When you're converting, you're going to have a lot of data, and that's probably the easiest way to do it. It sets all your columns for you, which is real nice, but you can create manually. So I could click Add here, and I could say, call that field 1. The type would be string max. It's not required. Then I click Add. Field 2, string max, add, so on and so forth, right? And then I would hit Next. And again, this is my mapping tab where I'd map it to Excel. And you have to do this whether you decide in the next step to either not use a template or use a template. You still have to do this. So we hit Submit, and then we have our Create Demo. And when I check this box, when I scroll over and I click Publish, this time I'll go ahead and I'll choose to not publish a template. Maybe it's a very small list that doesn't change very often, and I don't need a template for it. So I can click Publish. Now it's a production list, and what we'll notice is when I go to edit this list, so I click the checkbox to edit, I have a new option here called Edit Data. Okay, so now I can just edit the data directly in that list. So I didn't have any data yet, so I could do add new, and I could say value 1, just as an example, and click the check mark. And now I have value 1. I could click add, and there we go. And if I want to change that, for example, make it something meaningful, I have to click this edit button, and I can say, well, maybe that's the actual plant. Okay, save it. And that's how you'd maintain it basically manually one at a time. If it, like I said, if it was maybe a small list that rarely changes and you don't have to make a lot of entries. Otherwise, the recommendation is to use the template that we demonstrated. Okay, so now I will jump back to the PowerPoint and we'll just kind of briefly talk about a few other things. And so some key considerations when moving to Evolve. We're a resource that's always available. CPS has migrated dozens and dozens of WinShuttle solutions already manually. So we've become experts on Evolve. We're the premier partner for WinShuttle services, and we definitely know what we're doing when it comes to moving to Evolve, especially when it comes to taking designer solutions and moving them to the new Evolve platform. That takes a lot of manual effort. I will mention that there is a migration tool coming out from WinShuttle. That's available starting with version 20.1 of Evolve. I believe it's supposed to be released at the end of this month. I'm not sure if that's still going to take place or not, but we have seen it, and it does look pretty fantastic. From a form and workflow, perspective, it can convert composer solutions, so foundation composer solutions. It cannot at this time convert designer solutions, and the more migration capabilities that you have are increased as you increase the version of foundation. So the migration tool will work better with a foundation 12.1 solution than it would with like a solution that was created in Composer 11.3, for example. Okay, so just be aware of that. There are still objects that you may want to manually convert before you convert the solution itself. One such object is a reference data list, as we just talked about, because when you do convert, it converts it and only allows you to edit it that manual way we just saw. So you might want to convert it beforehand to create the template so that you can better manage those objects. I believe groups have to be created beforehand, and things of that nature as well. You have to set up your apps beforehand, obviously. And then there is a standalone script conversion within that migration tool as well that allow you to take your scripts, download them, and then basically set them up in the new Evolve environment. It'll take away a lot of manual effort. That's really all that I had as far as content today. So we'll just check the chat real quick and see if there are any questions lingering out there. But thanks everybody for your time, and I really appreciate it. Okay, so it looks like we do have a question out here. I answered a couple of them, but it looks like we do have a question. So how does the SharePoint list change to the new reference data list when you move a Composer 11 solution to Evolve? And does it change the solution parameters also, or do we have to touch and change each of the solutions that used a SharePoint list previous to Evolve? Okay, so it really depends on how you migrate. If you start, at version 20.1 and you have a Composer 11 solution, within the migration tool, you can migrate the reference data list, the SharePoint list to a reference data list within the migration tool itself. There is a little bit of, interaction that you would have to do. You have to, touch a few settings, things like that, as you kind of go through the migration tool wizard, if you will. But when you create a reference data list in the migration tool, it basically creates that list like that last list we just saw, right? So we just created a list where we could only edit the list, one entry at a time. And that's how it's going to create the list if you migrate it. That's why I recommend actually migrating the list before you do the migration tool, the way that I showed, where we go in and we just manually create the list. So it's a little bit time consuming, but then after, if you have to do any kind of mass changes to your reference data list, it's a lot easier to do that with the Excel template than to have to go in and manually edit everything one at a time. And if you decide to, use the migration tool and convert the SharePoint list to reference data list, and then later on you decide, I really don't like editing my entries one at a time, you can always create a new reference data list and just use the template for that new reference data list, and then go in your solution and point, anything in the solution to that. So you're not stuck with it forever. Obviously, there would just be a little bit of a manual effort to make the change. So hopefully that answers that question. But yeah, either you use the migration tool or it would be a manual effort. And if you're going to do a manual effort, I recommend doing it earlier. So I know we had some difficulties with how the presentation looked. We will be posting this on YouTube, and I'll double check before we do that to make sure that when it's out there, it's clear. I apologize that you guys couldn't see it well. We were kind of far into it before I realized that was happening. So, I really apologize for that. I don't see any other questions out here. One thing that I do want to just touch on, so these webinars, we're going to keep them coming. If you want to sign up, you can do that at Clear Process Solutions. If you have any ideas or things you want us to cover, feel free to email us at info@clearprocesssolutions.com, and we'd be happy to take any topics that you guys provide and do a session on those. The next web tips will be next month, Thursday, December 17th, and we'll be doing a WinShuttle Composer topic called landing page solutions. We'll show you how to create landing page solutions. And again, all the web tips recordings can be found on YouTube. As I mentioned, this one will also be put out on YouTube so that hopefully you guys can have a look at it if you want to again, and it will be much more clear. Apologize for the technical difficulties there. And then lastly, Clear Process Solutions offers solution care. That's kind of hyper care for all your WinShuttle needs. And if you want more information on that, again, feel free to contact us. Here's our contact information. And, again, thank you everybody for your time. Thanks for bearing with me. And I really appreciate the time and the opportunity to show you guys the new Evolve platform.